So I've created this very basic PHP application. It's kind of like a forum, except a very stripped down version of a forum where you can register an account and then log into that account. Then create a topic. Then that topic appears on the home page. Then you can reply. And there's absolutely no protection against spam. So someone can just log in or create new users. So there's the 3 new users that I just created. And there's no protection against no protection against spam posting. So just keep posting the same thing over and over. But this is actually like way worse than it actually seems, because you can set up a robot very easily to automate a spam attack. Like this is for the user registration, and all it's checking for is that they did type in a username and it's not equal to an empty string. Same for the password. Then if that username doesn't exist, then insert it. If it's not, then they'll tell them the username is already taken. And there's no captcha or anything or any kind of checking of any type. So I've created this thing that attacks this, and it it opens up curl and requests the register page and posts with the username and password, which I'm just iterating through. You could iterate through 100 times of doing this with just a number on the end of the username. And so I'll run this. So remember this, these are all the users that we have right now. So it's creating 100 new users. But you can't see them here because there's no way to, I didn't set up a way to search the users there, but this is going to finish in a little bit. Oh, I forgot to save the file. It's actually creating 1,000 new users or something like that, 900. So the attack is still running and we're up to like hundreds of spam users. Well, anyway, if I were to select one of those users, like spam user uh, 792, I could use that spam user to log in as spam user by having curl request the login page, post its username and password, and save the cookie from that request, because the the login is just using a PHP session, and it saves the session cookie, which is, or I'll show you it in a little bit. So it's created a bunch of users now. So the login, so it'll log in as the spam user and save the cookie, then do 100 requests of creating a topic which has no protection to it, using the cookie that it logged in with. So I actually did go the extra mile and do prevent SQL injection. So this is mostly just about spamming a unprotected interface. So there, the spam user 792 just posted a bunch of iterated topics, and here's topic 1 at the very bottom. And they could continue to do that, you know. They could just, make this like 1,000, change the title to FU, and the post to spam or whatever. And it's, I don't know, it gets ridiculous at a certain point. And the same thing can be done for a particular topic. So attack this and make a bunch of posts on it. I'm gonna log in as spam user 792 again. I guess he's replying to his own topic. It's pretty much the same thing that's being done, only it's a different request after the cookie is saved. And the cookie is just like it's just this PHP hash that uniquely identifies a client. So this is really, really bad if someone were to figure out how insecure this application is, and it's perfectly fine to make something like this as long as you're learning, because this is a really good thing. It's like setting up the MySQL queries and stuff. But I decided to make some feeble attempts at securing this under a different directory. And I'll show you some of the things that I did to start out. It works exactly the same. I didn't change any of the stuff except for, so you can still use it like the other one. Okay, so this part I added a CAPTCHA, but it's like the world's worst CAPTCHA. Okay, so it all works, except that the register page now has this number that is generated that you have to submit. So I'm going to close all these from the other one. Um, so this random number, it's really just an MD5 hash of a pseudo random number and the current Unix time. So it's super, like it's not the best thing you could possibly be doing. Like I just use MD5 because it's easy to remember the command of MD5. And so in order to register user, you have to also submit this random number with it. However, um, it's not that difficult to use regular expressions to first request the register page, get all of the text back, so you'll be getting all of this text, then match that particular HTML tag, then match the hash within it, and then you have that match, so you can just send it out with your registration. And I just used like different types of securing methods that aren't very good for the registration and the posting and the topic creation. I just like used a different type of thing for each one. So this works. It's like searching for this first, and then it searches for this second. And this is like an escaped version of what that would be. Then it searches for the hash. And then so I'll go ahead and execute this. And oh yeah, so forgot to save this again. I'll, I'll just make like a 50 new users, I guess. This is the hash that it's. The thing about this is that I think it's called a nonce, and the bad thing about this is that both the client and the server have to have some way of both knowing it in order for it to work. So with the topic creation, the topic creation, which is actually on the index. I've created this like server-side and client-side combination of the world's worst cryptography. So it starts with an MD5 hash, and then depending on whether these numbers, like these if statements, are true, then it will replace A, B, C, D, E, F, and then 1 through 0, or 0 through 9, with another random character. And this line here is just, I was having trouble figuring out whether it was actually equal. This line wouldn't exist because this is what JavaScript ends up with. It's like, it's generated by PHP too. So both PHP and JavaScript go through this convoluted process of determining what characters to replace over and over in a hash. And since they both do the same process, they're both going to end up with the same random string of characters at the end. And I'm thinking that the theory behind this is that you would want this JavaScript process to be like as complicated as you could possibly make it. But in the end, someone is just probably going to try and use like a JavaScript parser to parse the JavaScript, because both the client and the server have to know the nonce at some point somewhere. So even if this JavaScript is like completely unreadable and obfuscated and stuff, you would still need, you could still use like a parser, JavaScript parser within the bot. But I did not, I sort of, since this is always using the same structure, like 45 greater than 10, 60 less than 50, it's always greater than 10, less than 50 for each of the numbers. And I added these like commented out curly braces to slightly make it more difficult to try and parse this, which it ended up not really mattering. To start off, it logs in like the other one does. I didn't bother putting any kind of challenge on the login just because if I put it there anyway, it was just going to be another thing that I would have to explain. And so it gets all this HTML, and the first thing it does is it finds everything within the script tags where it also contains this. So it knows it's getting the correct script. And then it removes all of the comments with the curly braces because they're pretty easy. Like sometimes they're there and sometimes they're not, but they're always the same pattern. Then get rid of the script tags themselves. I don't know why I did that, just make it easier. Then you need to have the actual number. So it searches for this string, finds it, and stores it in this variable. Then this big long regex is searching for just something that looks like this and separating them out so they're each in their own element of an array, because that's the what each step in the process, it's each one of these nested ifs with a replacement. And then it's separating out, since this is always greater than 50 and or less than 10, greater than 50, it's separating out the actual number from each of those. And adding them to these arrays. It's basically doing everything that was done here except in reverse and using regular expressions to parse out what the JavaScript is doing. So then it's looping through those arrays and running the same function that JavaScript is running. And at the end, I'm echoing out what the nonce is, and then creating the topic using the random number that JavaScript supposedly is supposed to generate. And I could get like more in depth to explaining how the code works, but it's I don't know, like since they're always in this order, A B C D E F 1 2 3 all the way to 0. Like this order never changes. It always starts with replacing A, replacing B. Only the if statements change and this changes, which is why I have this specific order here. And I'm technically looping through this string and replacing that specific character in that string with whatever it's supposed to be, if it's actually supposed to be replaced. So I'm gonna, let's see if I have to log in as, I don't know, spam user 47. And the text that I was putting through was just test, and then the number of the iteration. The post was test and the number of the iteration. Okay, now we're getting to the world's worst CAPTCHA, where if you're going to make a CAPTCHA, it should never be an image and text with no other elements to it, because I guess I'm already there. Okay. So I have this series of test images, and there's this optical character recognition software called Tesseract, and I did manipulations to the images to see if it was able to guess what the characters were. And this is just a freely available program, and if you wanted to make a program that like actually breaks a CAPTCHA, then you would probably be better off finding something like that rather than optical character recognition. So each one of these I did a test for. Oops. So starting off with the first one, it was able, you can pause the video and check this if you want to, but I'm pretty sure that it guessed perfectly what all these characters were. I'm not going to read through all of them and check to make sure it did, but it pretty much looks like it did. And the same for the second one, D381F30772, and it even got the capitalization correct and on both of these. But just by changing the height of each individual character, it's starting to not really know. Like it guessed some of it sort of right, but not really. And then applying a swirl to it's not really able to guess this at all. And then a swirl with a line passing slightly through it, there's no way it's going to be able to guess what these characters are. And the final result of what I thought was pretty good was something like this. Like a human can still read this, but considering, if you're considering people who can't see, then this might not match. I mean, it might not be good for that. But any like off-the-shelf optical character recognition is not going to be able to see what this is. And this uses a PHP library, or I don't know what to call it, something called image magic or iMagic. And I found that swirl image, if you're starting with a set width and height to the image, then you can reverse the swirl of that image. But if you swirl it then crop it, it makes it much more difficult to reverse that action. And it's just drawing a bunch of random lines that are trying to intersect with the characters, and it's different every time. So anyway, back to the CAPTCHA here. I'm doing the same login that I always do. And I'm going to use the topic ID 189. So I've already shown that the Tesseract can break this, or I mean, it can guess what this is very easily. And since the session variable is created within, like this is, the session variable is created within CAPTCHA.php. And it's not, like, find another way of generating a random string of numbers other than this. This is not very good. So anyway, there's the session CAPTCHA equals the hash. So in order to break it, you have to save the image first and save the cookie from the image as captcha.ping, and then use the tesseract from the shell on the captcha.ping and get the output from it. And for some reason it was like giving me strange like new lines and stuff, so I had to strip those out. And so then you have the CAPTCHA in a variable within the bot script, and it can do that, but you have to iterate through the CAPTCHA each time because you need a new CAPTCHA for each individual post. So I could go ahead and run this. It's kind of interesting. I'm just gonna run it through one iteration to begin with. Go back to this topic. And there it is. It bypassed the world's worst CAPTCHA. And if you look at the output.txt, yeah, this is this weird character that it's putting in the file, and the CAPTCHA that it saved. It was able to break that very easily. Or I guess guess it, because that's what the software was designed for, and this is like a perfectly printed string of characters with no, it wasn't scanned in off a document or anything. Yeah, okay, so anyway, I'm just gonna go ahead and do this for like 100 iterations too, because it's slightly slower because it has to save the captcha and stuff, but it fills up pretty fast. And the last thing that I wanted to show in this video was, so if you were paying attention, you notice that these strings have been populated here, and they don't happen. There's no JavaScript or PHP or anything to have those appear in the actual post or whatever, because it was generated using TamperMonkey. Using these two user scripts. So this is if you didn't want to parse the JavaScript or create a parser that parses it, you can just use the browser itself to spam post topics, because the browser is going to execute the JavaScript anyway. And what this does is every time it gets to the create topic page, it auto goes back to the index page so that it will run in a loop. And because if I uncomment this line, it will submit automatically. So it comes to this page, and when I reload the page, it will create a new topic. And the create topic page is where it's going to, where the form is going to. So in the user script, this only applies to this specific URL, and this only applies to the create topic URL. And since this is submitting every single time, it creates like a loop, because it goes back to the index page, it submits, and this tells you that, yeah, well, anyway. And if I did this correctly, save, both enabled, and you can see them populating up here. So if you didn't want to figure out how to parse the JavaScript or whatever, you can use this to spam post. I'm going to go ahead and stop this because it's annoying. I don't know if it's more or less efficient. I think a command line bot would, I don't know, they might be about the same speed depending on how complicated the JavaScript is. Well, anyway, I'm going to put all of the code that I used in this into the description, and I guess that's all I wanted to show. Thanks for watching.